Silence has a power that few dare to confront. It's not absence, it's presence in its purest form. It's the dry blow that leaves without excuses the one who got used to your constant giving. Because when you stop running after someone who doesn't value your time or your energy, you're not losing anything, you're recovering everything you had set aside to beg for attention. That emptiness that seems hard at the beginning is not a punishment, it's the necessary space to breathe again. The truth is simple and raw. The more you run after, the more invisible you become. The human brain despises what is always available. It gets used to it. It gets bored. It takes it for granted. And while you wear out your days sending the first message, waiting for a response that never comes, justifying others' silences, the other person learns that they can have you without any effort. That's the vicious circle that destroys your dignity. Breaking it requires courage. It requires accepting that anxiety is not calmed with insistence, but with detachment. That true strength is not in showing how much you insist, but in deciding not to do it anymore. Silence is a mirror. It reflects your value and at the same time confronts the other with the absence of what they no longer receive. That silence weighs, discomforts, reveals, and it also reveals you to yourself, because you learn to see clearly where you were giving your energy without receiving anything healthy in return. This is not an invitation to empty indifference, it's a call to consciousness. To understand that your time is a limited resource and that you can't spend it on someone who doesn't appreciate it. The Stoics taught that the only thing you truly possess is your mind, your attitude, and your ability to choose how you respond. And here the wisest response, although it hurts, is to be silent. Be silent to listen to yourself. Be silent to stop chasing what doesn't deserve to be reached. Be silent to regain the calm you had lost. That's the starting point. From here, the lessons become practical weapons that anyone can use in everyday life to cut emotional dependence and regain dignity. Because when you choose silence and detachment, you're not losing someone, you're winning yourself. On Don't Chase, drop the first message. Attachment to a person who doesn't value your presence is like running after a shadow under the midday sun. You see it, you feel it close. It seems that if you take one more step, you can reach it. But the more you run, the further it gets. That endless race only exhausts you and never takes you anywhere. That's the reality of insisting, of always sending the first message, of showing interest when the other person doesn't care. Silence and pause are the only way to stop that wear and tear, to look the other way and realize that you don't need to chase anything to exist. Not chasing is an act of dignity, a reminder that your value does not depend on external validation. The first step is to let go of the impulse to be the one who opens the channel of communication. When you are always the one who writes first, you are sending a hidden message, your need. The other person perceives it even if they don't say it, and that changes the balance of the relationship. The constant becomes devalued, the sure thing becomes boring, the available loses mystery. Humans tend to desire what is not guaranteed, and by always offering yourself without pause, you become predictable, expected, no longer surprising. Silence, on the other hand, awakens a different reaction. It makes your absence visible, sets an invisible limit, and forces the other person to wonder what is happening. From the Stoic perspective, not chasing is applying the discipline of the mind. Epictetus taught that true freedom consists in controlling what depends on you and letting go of what doesn't. You can control your impulse to write. You can choose not to react immediately. You can reclaim your time instead of giving it to uncertainty. That choice is not simple because anxiety pushes, habit pressures, and the mind invents excuses to justify it. But that's where the practice begins. Every time you stop your fingers before writing, you are training in self-control. And self-control is one of the most powerful virtues you can cultivate. Breaking this pattern is not indifference, it's respect for your energy. No one deserves you betraying your peace by waiting for a signal. Stopping sending the first message doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself not to give yourself to someone who doesn't give you a place. That pause, although uncomfortable, creates an internal space where you can breathe. There you discover that you don't need the other person to confirm your value. There you understand that chasing only takes you away from yourself. Silence is a tactic and also a mirror. Sometimes, when you stop insisting, the other person notices what they were missing and comes closer. Other times, nothing happens, and that is the clearest signal that you were chasing a void. In either scenario, you win, because it's not about manipulating, it's about freeing yourself. It's about stopping mortgaging your dignity to receive crumbs of attention. It's about recognizing that the person who most needs to hear from you is you, and that silence is the strongest language you can speak to yourself. The next time you feel the urge to be the initiator, remember the shadow. Remember that race never ends. Remember that stopping is braver than continuing, because whoever doesn't acknowledge your presence doesn't deserve your insistence, and because chasing only makes you a prisoner of an illusion you will never reach. True freedom begins when you decide to stop. 2. Bury the phone and break the spell. The phone in your hands resembles a modern, shiny and silent altar where you offer each minute of your attention as if it were a sacrifice. You wait for a sign, a notification, a flash of light to alleviate the anxiety. That small object becomes an invisible chain that binds you to the anticipation of the other. It's not the device that controls you. It's the spell you cast on yourself each time you check without reason. Each time you let the screen define whether you are seen or ignored. Burying the phone doesn't mean destroying it. It means taking away the power it should never have had over your peace. What starts as a habit ends up being a pattern of dependence. Constantly checking the phone reinforces the idea that your worth depends on a response. The mind enters a cycle of reward and frustration. A notification lifts you, silence sinks you. This oscillation is a slow poison that wears down your self-esteem and consumes your time. Breaking that spell is an act of rebellion against an emotional addiction disguised as a daily habit. Detachment begins when you choose to put physical distance, when you decide to leave the phone out of your reach, when you understand that not all silence needs to be interpreted as rejection. Stoicism teaches to differentiate between what depends on you and what does not. The message that does not arrive, the call that does not happen, the attention that you do not receive, all of that is not in your hands. What is under your control is how you manage your attention, how you decide to use your time, what mental space you choose to nourish. When you bury the phone, even for a few hours, you send a clear message. Your life is not subordinate to a device or anyone's responses. You regain your energy to invest it in what does build, in what does belong to you, in what does not depend on external validation. Many fear that silence because they confuse it with emptiness. But that emptiness is fertile if you know how to use it. By turning off the digital noise, you hear your own thought, recognize the anxiety you were trying to cover with notifications, and discover that you don't need to be available all the time to be someone valuable. The buried phone is not an absence of life. It's proof that you can live without depending on constant stimuli. That decision gives you back power, calm, and clarity. Breaking the spell does not happen overnight, because the mind is trained to seek immediate reward. Therefore, bury the phone at critical moments, before sleeping, upon waking, during the hours you need concentration. These spaces become rituals of liberation. You stop giving your emotions to the sway of a screen and begin to strengthen your self-control. It's not easy at the beginning, but every minute you spend without checking it is a victory over anxiety. Detachment is practiced in the everyday, not in empty speeches. When you choose to leave the phone face down, away from your hands, you are telling yourself that your time is worth more than the wait. You are training your mind not to beg for attention. You are reminding yourself that calm does not depend on an external signal, but on your ability to sustain yourself in silence. This practice, repeated over and over, becomes discipline, and discipline makes you free. Because in the end, what enslaves is not the device, but the hope that through it will come what is denied to you in person. Burying the phone is breaking the spell. It's proving to yourself that you can breathe without that confirmation. It's discovering that your worth was never in a pending message, but in your decision not to live pending on anyone. 3. Make paper your nightly outlet. The restless mind resembles a room full of echoes. Each thought bounces, multiplies, and comes back stronger than it entered. When night falls and everything outside quiets down, that internal noise intensifies. That's when anxiety disguises itself as insomnia, when the need for attention turns into unanswered questions. There, paper transforms into a refuge. A blank sheet does not judge, does not ignore, does not respond with indifference. It offers you a safe space to release what burns you inside. Turning nightly writing into a habit is like opening a window in the middle of a suffocating room. Air comes in, burdens are lightened, and the mind regains oxygen. Detachment does not always start with big decisions. Sometimes it comes from simple gestures. Writing what you feel at the end of the day is an act of honesty with yourself. It's the moment when you stop looking outside for what you can only release within. By putting your anxiety, your anger, or your sadness into words, you take away the power from what kept you trapped in silence. The written thought ceases to be an invisible monster and becomes something you can observe, analyze, and understand. This change of perspective is one of the most powerful tools of emotional detachment. The Stoics spoke about examining each day before sleeping. Seneca wrote that he reviewed his actions and nightly thoughts like a judge reviewing a case. He did not do it to punish himself, but to correct himself, to avoid repeating mistakes, and to cultivate clarity. Following this practice, paper becomes a mirror. It shows you where you gave too much, where you ran after someone who didn't deserve it, where you failed yourself, and where you were strong. This constant review strengthens character and prevents you from falling back into the same patterns of dependence. Writing also breaks the urgency to communicate with someone who does not respond. Many times you reach for the phone to send a message that relieves the pressure in your chest. But what you really need is not for the other person to read you, but for you to listen to yourself. Paper fulfills this function. It absorbs your words, gives you back calm, and eliminates the weight of having to carry it in silence. What you leave written no longer lives in your mind, it lives on the page, and that allows you to sleep more peacefully. Make the nightly outlet a ritual. Instead of checking your phone before sleeping, turn on a dim lamp, grab a pen, and let out everything you've accumulated. It doesn't matter if it's messy, it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. The goal is not to create beauty, but to release pressure. At first, it may seem insignificant, but over time, you will notice that your relationship with your emotions changes. You no longer run to seek them in others, you recognize them within yourself. This simple gesture reminds you that the most important validation is your own. Paper also keeps your won battles. By rereading what you wrote over the days, you will notice progress that you did not see at the time. You will see how the intensity of your anxiety decreases, how what seemed unbearable yesterday barely weighs today. This contrast is proof of your growth, evidence that silence and detachment work when practiced consistently. The blank sheet is a silent ally, a witness to your strength. Make it your confidant every night, and you will discover that you do not need to overflow your emotions in conversations that are never reciprocated. Your dignity deserves a better space. Make paper your nightly outlet and turn it into the living proof that your peace no longer depends on anyone else but you. 4. Overcome anxiety with movement. Anxiety is like an invisible cage. No matter how large its bars are, you feel it pressing on your chest, tightening your breath, and forcing you to go in circles within your mind. This cage does not exist in reality, but your body perceives it as if it were made of iron. And the more you stay still, the stronger its boundaries become. Movement, on the other hand, breaks the bars. Each step you take, each bend, each stretch, is like bending the metal that seemed indestructible. The body releases what the mind cannot let go of on its own. When you're trapped in waiting, looking at the phone over and over again, anxiety feeds on inaction. It is in this state where thoughts repeat like an endless echo. Why doesn't he answer? Did I do something wrong? What does this silence mean? This mental repetition is fuel for anguish. Here is where movement comes in as medicine. It's not about running marathons or training to exhaustion. It's about remembering that your body is a channel of release. Walking, exercising, stretching, or simply getting up to tidy your space is enough to redirect that energy. What seemed an unbearable weight transforms into momentum, and what seemed empty begins to fill with action. The Stoics understood that the body and mind are inseparable allies. Marcus Aurelius spoke of how the soul strengthens when the body is disciplined, and he was not only referring to physical strength, but to the fact that the moving body helps the mind to regain balance. Anxiety is not argued with thoughts, it is weakened with actions. Each step you take is a silent affirmation. I am not a prisoner of waiting. I have power over my present. Movement breaks the illusion of external control. Because when someone doesn't respond, the only thing you achieve by staying still is to sink deeper into the feeling of helplessness. Instead, moving your body gives you a real sense of control. You choose to go for a walk, you choose to train, you choose to shape your energy instead of letting it rot inside you. This daily choice, repeated over and over again, trains the mind in discipline and strengthens emotional resilience. Anxiety will always look for excuses to stop you. It will tell you that you don't feel like it, that it's useless, that movement won't change the situation. And it's true, it doesn't change the other person, but it changes you. That's the essential difference. When you choose to move, you don't do it to manipulate anyone, you do it to release your own burden. Breathing regulates, muscle tension dissolves, the heart beats more rhythmically, and the mind clears. It's not a miracle, it's biology in your favor. Make movement your refuge every time you feel the pressure of waiting. Get out of bed, take steps around your room, go out into the street. Feel how anxiety loses strength when you wear it out in action. Make it your daily ritual, because it's not about waiting for calm to come on its own, but about building it with your own steps. Movement is a powerful reminder. You are not tied to anyone's silence. You do not depend on another's response to feel that you exist. Your body is proof of life. It is evidence of your autonomy. Every time you move, every time you choose to overcome immobility, you show that there is no invisible cage that can hold you. Anxiety may scream, but your steps are stronger. 5. Point out the impulse and take away its power. The impulse is like a thief who comes in at night. It doesn't warn, it doesn't ask for permission, it just appears and takes what it finds in its path. That's how it acts in your mind every time anxiety pushes you to write, to call, or to justify yourself. It's swift, sudden, and if you don't recognize it, it steals your calm in seconds. But when you name it, when you face it head-on and point it out for what it is, it loses strength. What once seemed an absolute command becomes an option you can reject. That simple act of identifying the impulse is like turning on a light in the darkness. It no longer scares you because you know where it comes from. Humans tend to act as slaves to the immediate. An emotion appears and turns into action almost without filter. That speed is what sustains emotional dependence, because when you feel the void, your automatic reaction is to seek the other. Send the message, open the conversation, beg for the answer. But what seems like a necessity is, in reality, a conditioned reflex. And the conditioned can be re-educated. The Stoics knew it. Between the stimulus and the reaction, there is always a space, and in that space is your freedom. Recognizing the impulse is to expand that space. It is to gain seconds that allow you to decide clearly instead of obeying without thinking. When the mind says, "Write to him right now," don't rush to obey. Stop and point out the emotion. This is anxiety. This is fear of being forgotten. This is insecurity disguised as urgency. Naming the impulse disarms it because it separates it from your identity. It is no longer you who needs, it is your mind trained in old patterns. You can choose differently. That is the power of detachment, to stop confusing what you feel with what you are. The practice is not easy because the impulse hits hard and disguises itself as logic. It tells you that if you don't write, you will lose the connection, that if you don't insist, you will show disinterest, that if you don't move now, the other will move away. But ask yourself coldly, has insistence brought the respect you seek? Or has it made your presence so commonplace that it is no longer valued? Every time you fall into the impulse, you feed the cycle. Every time you point it out and choose not to obey, you break a chain. Stoicism proposes observing the mind as a watchman observes a city. Your attention is the guard that patrols, that detects suspicious movements and decides whether to act or not. If you don't watch, the impulse comes in and wreaks havoc. If you are attentive, you see it coming and disarm it before it controls you. That conscious vigilance is a form of discipline that is trained every day. Do the practical exercise. The next time you feel the desire to write, breathe and name it. This is fear. This is anxiety. This is attachment. Write it down on a sheet if necessary. That simple gesture separates you from the internal fire. And in that short distance, you have the power to decide with the mind and not with urgency. The impulse is just a visitor, not a master. Pointing it out is to strip it of the disguise of necessity. And when you strip it of that power, you discover that you are not a prisoner of your anxiety, you are the owner of your choice. That daily practice turns silence into a conscious decision and not a lost battle. Because in the end, what makes you strong is not feeling the impulse, but not obeying it. 6. Make silence your initial response. Silence is like a stone wall in the middle of an open field. Those who face it may interpret it as coldness, indifference, or mystery, but the truth is that this wall is not there for decoration, it is there to protect. This is how it works when you decide that your first response will not be a justification or an explanation, but silence. This invisible wall is not raised against others, it is raised in your favor. It is the first line of defense against emotional manipulation, against the anxiety that pushes you to react immediately, and against the habit of giving up your calm in exchange for crumbs of attention. Responding immediately is a reflex born out of fear. You fear losing connection, you fear seeming distant, you fear that the other person will misinterpret your pause. However, the paradox is clear. The faster you respond, the less value your word acquires. The immediate becomes common, the available becomes disposable. Silence, on the other hand, introduces a void that makes you think, that forces you to notice your absence, that creates a contrast in a world saturated with instant responses. That contrast is what restores strength to your presence. The Stoics understood that silence is not weakness, but strategy. Marcus Aurelius reflected that speaking less and observing more strengthens judgment because the mind has time to analyze before reacting. Applying this principle to your everyday life means not letting yourself be carried away by emotional urgency. When someone hurts you with indifference, your first response should not be to beg or ask. It should be the silence that reminds you that you are not obliged to participate in dynamics that wear you out. Silence is a mirror. When you choose not to respond, the other person comes face to face with their own actions. If they expected your immediate reaction to feel powerful, they don't get it. If they relied on your availability to feed their ego, they discover a void. That reflection can be uncomfortable, it can irritate, but it also reveals where manipulation was and where you were giving away your energy. And most importantly, it reveals you to yourself. You discover that you can withstand the discomfort of not reacting and that your value does not depend on filling empty spaces with hurried words. Make silence a conscious habit. It doesn't mean cutting off all communication. It means that your first reaction will never be impulsive. Breathe, wait, analyze if it's really worth responding. Many times you will find that what seemed urgent dissolves over time. That interval is your strength training. Every minute you hold the silence strengthens your self-control. Every chosen pause is a reminder that your calm is more important than the rush of others. The modern world glorifies the immediate, but the immediate is rarely wise. Responding with silence is swimming against the current. It is refusing to be a slave to others' time. You decide your pace, you decide your space, you decide your dignity. This attitude is not indifference, it is self-respect. And self-respect is what differentiates those who depend on external validation from those who stand on their own axis. The next time you feel the pressure to respond immediately, remember the stone wall. Remember that you don't need to explain every silence or justify every pause. Make silence your first response and let it speak for you. Because sometimes silence says more than 1,000 words. It says that you have control, that you know how to wait, that you don't need to prove anything. And in that voiceless message lies your greatest strength. 7. Build while others wait. Waiting is like a halted hourglass. The sand doesn't fall, time seems frozen, and your attention is consumed watching each grain at rest. This is how it works when your life revolves around what someone will or won't do, whether they'll respond or not, whether they'll value or continue to ignore. You become a slave to a time that doesn't advance, to a clock that never changes. But the moment you decide to build instead of wait, the clock starts running again. The energy that was once wasted on anxiety begins to turn into projects, habits, actions that give you back control and purpose. The biggest mistake of emotional dependence is believing that your worth depends on being seen by another. This belief paralyzes you because you put your life on pause until you receive attention. However, attention is not demanded or begged for, it is attracted. And nothing attracts more than a person who keeps moving, who doesn't stop, who builds even in the midst of silence. When you choose to take care of yourself, you send a powerful message. Your life is not on hold for anyone. That attitude, even if you don't say it, is a reminder that your energy is too valuable to be wasted waiting. The Stoics spoke of living in accordance with nature, which means to act, grow, progress, not to remain stagnant in passivity. Seneca said that it's not that we have little time, but that we waste much of it on things that don't matter. Eternally waiting for a response is one of those losses. Every day you let pass watching the screen is a day that doesn't return. It's a brick you didn't put in your own construction. Therefore, every minute of others' silence should be turned into your own action. Building can mean many things. It can be exercising your body, reading to nourish your mind, working on a personal project, improving your environment, learning a new skill. The goal is not to fill the void with random activities, but to channel your energy into something that brings you closer to the life you want. Thus, Time ceases to be an enemy that reminds you of what you don't receive and becomes an ally that gives you space to grow. The result is twofold. You strengthen your self-esteem and at the same time break the illusion that your worth depends on someone else's movement. Passive waiting feeds anxiety, while active building generates clarity. When you work on yourself, your mind has less space to obsess over what's missing. You start to notice real progress, small achievements that, added up, become profound changes. And those changes are a declaration of emotional independence. You don't do it to impress anyone. You do it because your life deserves to be lived, with or without a response. Make each silence an opportunity to grow. Turn waiting into an engine of discipline. Ask yourself every time anxiety appears, what can I build right now instead of standing still? That question is a powerful tool because it shifts the focus from what you can't control to what is in your hands. Building while others wait is choosing to be a protagonist instead of a spectator. It's refusing to let your story depend on someone else's will. It's an act of silent rebellion that says, my life goes on. My worth is not on hold. My energy is not wasted. And with every action you take, with every brick you place on your own path, you move away from the emptiness of waiting and closer to the strength of independence. Because in the end, what truly weighs is not what others do with you, but what you decide to do with your time. 8. Turn off the noise, protect your calm. The mind is like a tranquil lake. When no one disturbs it, it clearly reflects the sky and everything around it. But if you throw stones one after another, the water fills with ripples and loses its transparency. This is how external noise works. Every notification, every foreign opinion, every meaningless word you let in becomes a stone that distorts your peace. And if you don't learn to protect that inner space, you'll live reacting to the chaos of others instead of deciding for yourself. Turning off the noise doesn't mean running away from the world. It means choosing which voices deserve your attention and which do not. Most of the time, what interferes so much with your calm has no real value. You check notifications that don't change anything in your life. You let yourself be affected by irrelevant comments, or you get caught up in empty discussions. Each of these stimuli steals a piece of your energy and feeds the anxiety you were already carrying. When you decide to turn off the noise, even if only for moments, you regain control of your mental space and remind yourself that not everything deserves a response, let alone your distress. The Stoics taught that serenity comes from self-control, not from external circumstances. If the noise from outside manages to disturb you, it's not because of the noise itself, but because you've left the doors of your mind open. Learning to close them is an act of discipline. By silencing notifications, by choosing silence over discussion, by limiting exposure to what doesn't contribute to you, you are reinforcing the wall that protects your tranquility. That wall is not coldness, it's wisdom. Make calm your priority. When you feel the noise invading, step back, breathe and decide what deserves your energy. Sometimes it's enough to turn off the phone, to end a conversation, to remain silent in the face of what only seeks to provoke you. That simple gesture marks the difference between living at the mercy of chaos and living from clarity. The world will always have noise, but you choose if you let it reverberate within you. Protecting your calm is protecting your essence. And when calm becomes your shield, no distraction can divert you from what truly matters. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you watched the whole thing, comment "I am Stoic" as our secret signal to know that you're a true student of Stoicism. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video, and remember, keep cultivating your Stoic mind.